Hey everyone, it's Marianne Pizzatola from the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees with a message. After almost 2 years of hearing our videos, you are well aware that the current debacle was caused by the United Federation of Teachers leader Michael Mulgrew negotiating his union agreement to be partially funded on the backs of all the other unions in the city, which resulted in the 2014 and the 18 MLC agreements, which required all the city unions and the retirees to come up with givebacks that you were told didn't exist. But what many of you haven't heard about is that all of your unions are complicit, because you all took the money for that year's round of collective bargaining to fund all of your raises. And those unions who have spoken out about the latest debacle over the last year really haven't spoken out with any fervor. Some of the unions don't even talk about the 2014 and 18 MLC agreements, and when they do, they imply that they were good deals because they saved the city money. Well, if they were such a good deal, they should try to convince us how good of a deal this was. And the ones that have stayed mum, they may want to finally stand up and say how bad this was, because they are about to get royally screwed. So right now I'm going to call out the UFA, the UFOA, the PBA, EMS Local 3621, CWA Local 1180, DC 37 Henry Garrido, Local 371, Local 372, and anyone else who really hasn't said much in the last year and a half. Some locals have put out a perfunctory email, but no one's really defended the retirees or their active workers. And we know why, and we want you to know why. You see, every single union in the city, because of the UFT's action, benefited from that deal. They all used the money for their raises. And this isn't about healthcare. This is about raises. It's about money, and it's about greed. But Medicare-eligible retiree healthcare was a means to an end. And I see that they all got their raises in the 2014 round of bargaining. They had to promise that the funding to pay it back was selling us off into privatized Medicare plans, and that was their method to get it funded. So right now, all the unions are living off raises that aren't funded, because we fought back and the court said what they were doing was illegal, which is why they are so desperately lying to all of you, active and retired, to get you to change the administrative code, threatening to eliminate every plan available to every employee and retiree, because they basically sold their soul to Robert Lynn from Office of Labor Relations. And you became the collateral damage, and so did we. Every single union in the city signed that 2014 and 2018 agreement into their collective bargaining agreements, making every single union complicit. And not a single union formed a coalition to stop the MLC like we begged them to, which we all know is basically run by DC 37 and the UFT, from stripping away the benefits from all of us because they chose to set this pattern. What can the union say at this point? We were given bad advice? Most of them used the same darn lawyer. Did they even ask their other lawyers? Or did they just take for granted that the MLC told them that this was a fact and it was a good thing and you should do this because this is the path to riches and wages? Or did they just blindly do it with loyalty, or was it blind laziness? And they didn't even realize that they were being lied to or taken advantage of. This most likely was either laziness or an element of greed. And they were really only worried about their own raises and making their current employees, active employees, happy that they got them a raise. They wanted to please their members without thinking that what the decisions that they were going to put into effect, how it was going to impact a current retiree or their own futures. The Tripartite Health Policy Committee labor representative is an attorney that represent the Municipal Labor Committee, the United Federation of Teachers, sanitation workers, and ironically, Emblem Health. And yet this person that sits in this position is not union. He's not a union president. And one could assume he must be somewhat conflicted in representing all of the 102 unions in the MLC, since he's only paid by 3 of them. No union has pushed back in 8 years or spoken out loudly to say that this was a bad deal. We can understand how difficult of an assessment that might be, admitting that you made a mistake. But it would be the smart, brave assessment at this point, because if the unions don't do something to push back on the Municipal Labor Committee now, they will all be complicit in contributing to the decimation of the employee and retiree health care plans in the city of New York. They were lied to, and they were manipulated by the Office of Labor Relations Commissioner Robert Lynn. You see, Robert Lynn has hated 12-126 since 1978. He hated it even more in 1986. And with his allegiance to the former Mayor Koch-era managers, including the current Office of Management and Budget, First Deputy Budget Director Kenneth Godner, and former Deputy Mayor Stanley Brezhnev, the 2014 and 18 MLC agreements were negotiated by them, and that put all the unions in checkmate before they even knew what was coming. Their goal the entire time was to pass premium on to employees and retirees. And by negotiating away health insurance stabilization fund, using your desperate desire for a contract and a wage increase that permitted you to sell off the only protection that you had for health care. Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Labor Relations approved the usage of the health insurance stabilization fund for your raises, requiring the unions to give back health care, retiree health care, to fund the wage packages. In essence, OLR and OMB defunded the unions. That's right. OLR and OMB defunded the unions. And so as to not expose themselves for what they realized or hadn't realized, they allowed themselves to be played by the very people that they thought that they were mutually negotiating with. They don't want to expose that they know what happened. They didn't want to admit what happened. And they don't want to admit that they got played by management, sold off their most vulnerable population, whom by tradition and past practice they protected. And they can't tell all their union members, all of you, that you are currently living off unfunded raises because the retirees organized and fought back to protect what was rightly theirs. And they can't admit that to you. You see, several months ago, Henry Garrido told us that the only way that they could pay back what they owed was to go 18 to 24 months with no raises. And I'm sure all of you won't be very happy about that. And yet it's easy to believe your union leadership when they call us names and try to diminish what we've accomplished, attack us simply for defending ourselves and what we earned and what we paid for during our work years. Our health care shouldn't be yours to sell off for your current raises. And yet here we are, where local CWA 1180, Gloria Middleton, is calling us union busting, anti-labor. Well, Ms. Middleton, your union agreed that the change in the law to 12-126 that we defended in court, you agreed to that. Before 6 judges and 2 courts, we won that case. And yet you believe Henry Garrido when he tells you that what we did was wrong, when he broke the law and got all of you to be complicit to that arrangement. Local 3621, Vinnie Variali. And the same thing with Local 371 and 372, Anthony Wells and Sean Francois. They won't even return our calls either. And yet they all continue to carry Henry's water and collect the stipends for being on their committees, so of course they won't speak out or they're going to lose their money. Sean even tried to quiet us in San Juan when we tried to push back on the mayor's lies at Somos. So today you have a choice. You can tell your union leaders that what they did was immoral, selling off their own former members' health care, painting us as complainers for not wanting to be forced into managed Medicare Advantage plans. Our question to you is, if that's acceptable to you, then you'd better be comfortable being in a HIP HMO plan or another HMO plan tomorrow, because that's what's going to happen. You have no idea what you are forcing upon us, that it's not the same, it's not equal, it doesn't mirror senior care, it's not equal to anything that we are currently in, traditional Medicare. It is a pure diminishment of what we have. But you wouldn't know that because you're not in our plans. You haven't looked at them and you haven't looked at the contracts. But it's easier for you to call us liars. So how do you comment on that? You haven't even fact-checked us in the last 2 years, and we begged you to. But we also want you to know that through all of this, there are 2 unions that have an escape hatch. The United Federation of Teachers, under the state moratorium clause, and possibly DC 37 because they have their own health insurance plan. DC 37 meant team. And all the rest of you are going to get screwed. And maybe then you might just push back on the way the voting system is in the Municipal Labor Committee, or you might just continue to take it laying down. Take it again. When are you going to stop being collateral damage? And when are you going to stop allowing the Municipal Labor Committee to act like a mafia? If all the unions in the MLC push back on the two unions that control it, that would speak volumes. And it would also let your members know that you're fighting for them. And I don't mean abstaining like the PBA does. That's a lame-ass thing to do. I mean fighting back like the retirees are. In the last several weeks, union members have reached out to us and joined our organization. And they asked us to cite our talking points, and we did. They are fact-checking us. It's exciting because they are finally realizing we are telling them the truth about everything. And they're not listening to you anymore. We asked you to make the hard decisions that you had to make and you should have made in 2014. So we ask you, after everything that's happened, we're letting you know right now. If you move to eliminate any of the city health plans that we currently have, you attempt to force retirees into Medicare Advantage plans again, without leaving us the option of keeping the current plans that we have with no premium if they are under the HIP HMO benchmark, which you have illegally been reducing, which not only reduced what the city had to pay, it also reduced your funding of the Health Insurance Stabilization Fund. I ask you, which end of history are you going to be on? That's a good question. Hope you have an answer. Everyone's watching.